in today's lesson, we are going to look at how to create a pivot table in Microsoft Excel. Okay, so basically a pivot table is a tool in Microsoft Excel that is used to summarize and analyze data. Okay, so there are times when you have a lot of data such that getting information that you want, it becomes something challenging. Okay, so let's say you are working in a production company, and your manager or yourself as a supervisor wants to know either the daily production, weekly production, or monthly production. Okay, now getting that information when you have a lot of data becomes something challenging. Okay, but through use of pivot tables, it becomes very easy to summarize data. Okay, now let's see how we can create a pivot table from this data that we have here. Okay, now before we do that, I want to mention that this data that we have here is not for any business organization. Okay, I simply typed this data for the purpose of this lesson. Okay, so if there is any book that exists with any of the book titles that are appearing here, please know that I don't intend to infringe on the copyright. Okay, so I needed to say that before we proceed. Okay, now the starting point of creating a pivot table is knowing the information that is needed. Okay, once you know the information that is needed, you can now go on and generate a pivot table. Okay, so now let's look at the fields that we have here. Okay, so we have date, month, year, book title, author, seller, quantity, unit price, and the title. Okay, so those are the field names that we have there. Okay, now from this data we want to show, okay, the number of books that were sold per author in the month of January and February. Okay, the number of books that were sold per author in the in the month of January and February. Okay, so we can get started. Okay, so when you want to create a pivot table, go to the insert tab. Okay, so when you click on the insert tab in the tables group, okay, the first option is pivot table and the second option is recommended pivot tables. Okay, now these are the pivot tables that are recommended for you by Microsoft Excel. Okay, so you can choose from these recommended one if you don't mind. Okay, you can choose from these. Okay, they're just different layouts of pivot tables, so you can choose from these. Okay, now I want to show you how you can create your own pivot table. Okay, I want to show you how you can create your own pivot table. So the first thing that you should do is to click on the first button there called the pivot table, and once you click there, this is going to appear. Okay, choose the data that you want to analyze. So once you click on the pivot table option, now the computer automatically is going to choose the data for you. Okay, so it is now up to you to check if the data that has been selected is the correct data that you want to analyze. Okay, so if for instance there's some data that I don't want to include here, I'm going to exclude it. Okay, by pressing shift and the up arrow just to remove some of the rows that I don't want to include. Okay, so we can do that. Okay, just press the down arrow to go back. Okay, and you can as well exclude some of the columns by pressing shift and the left arrow. Okay, the left arrow, and then you'll be able to exclude some of the rows. But in this case, we want to analyze all the data, so we must select all the data. Okay, we must select all the data, and once you have selected your data that you want to analyze, the other thing that you're supposed to do is to decide where to place your pivot table. Okay, choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed. Okay, so you can decide either to put it on a new worksheet or on the existing worksheet. So if you decide to put it on the existing worksheet, what that means is that your pivot table report will be placed on the very worksheet where your data is. Okay, so if I choose existing worksheet, then my pivot table will be just somewhere wherever I'm going to put it. Okay, so for me, I prefer putting the pivot table on a new worksheet, so I'm going to select new and then click OK. So once you do that, this is going to appear. Okay, it looks scary, but it is something very simple. You even be wondering where to start from, but don't worry, it's something very simple. Okay, now like I said, generating a pivot table, it begins with what you need. Okay, knowing what information is needed. So like I said, I want to know the number of books that were sold per author in the month of January and February. So let us look at this area here. So we have table fields, okay, and if you look at these fields that we have here are actually the fields that we have on our data. They are date, month, year, book title, author, seller, quantity, and the price. Okay, so those are the fields that we have there. Okay, so I want to know the number of books that were sold per author in the month of January and February. So I'm going to drag the author and drop it under rows. Okay, so these are the authors that we have. Okay, these are the authors that we have. Okay, now the other thing, like I said, we want the number of books that were sold. So the field that shows the number of books that were sold is the quantity field. So I'm going to get this one and drop it on that area there, value. So on this area we put fields that show that have numeric values that can be added. Okay, so we can as well put the month here under filter so that we are able to filter in any case where we want to filter. Okay, so we must do that. Okay, so now once you have done that, you have filter there. Okay, so filter, at the moment we don't have any filter because it says all. It means that this data which is here is for all the months. Okay, if you have months from January up to December, it means that this data will be for all the months from January to December. But in our case, we only have 2 months here, January and February. So this data is for the month of January and February. This is where the books that were sold per author in the number of the month of January and February. Okay, so let's say for example I want to show the book titles as well for each author. So I'm going to get this book title and drop it under author there, so we can see the author and the book that he authored or she authored. So we can see that the author James B, the book title, okay, Work Hard to Prosper. Okay, so that number of books were sold. Okay, John T, okay, Think Outside the Box, 64 copies were sold. Judith M, okay, 47 copies were sold. African Culture, okay, MC, Mike C, Enjoying Life, 46 copies. Okay, Peter S, Save to Invest, 53 copies were sold. Okay, so like I said, you are guided with what information is needed. Okay, that is how you create a pivot table. Okay, now when I'm dealing with pivot tables, I don't like the grid lines, so I'll deactivate them. Okay, so you have your pivot table here. Okay, and you can as well make your pivot table look nice by choosing these table designs here. Okay, you can choose any of these table designs just to make your pivot table look nice. So you do that. Okay, so let's see how we can create another pivot table. Okay, in the next pivot table, we want to see the number of books that were sold by each seller. Okay, the number of books that were sold by each bookseller. Okay, so we are going to do this. Let's deactivate this. Okay, so this time let's get the seller and drop it there. Okay, and then let's get the quantity, which shows the number of books that were sold, and put it there. Okay, so these are our sellers. Okay, these are our sellers, so we can even write sellers. Okay, these are our sellers. So this one sold 51 books, so we can as well show the book titles that were sold by each seller. So you can see that these are the books that Ines sold, these are the books that Joseph sold, these are the books that were sold by Mess. Okay, so African Culture, Ines sold 10 copies. Enjoying Life, Ines sold 6 copies. Just like that, you can see that. Okay, so it becomes very easy to understand data. Okay, when you are dealing with the pivot tables. Okay, let me say I just want to know the number of books that were sold by each seller in the month of January, because this one is saying all months. So I want to filter so that I can have only January. So I will deactivate February and say, okay, so this month, this data here is now specifically for the month of January. Okay, if I want for the month of February, I'm going to deactivate January and then select February and then say okay. So this data is specifically for the month of what? February. Okay. So that is how simple it is. So this issue of pivot tables, it's a dynamic thing because you'll be dealing with different situations. Okay, you'll be dealing with different situations. Okay, let's also look at let's say we make a pivot table that shows the revenue that was received, okay, in the month of January and February through book sales. Okay, so let's say we want to see the revenue that was received, okay, in the month of January and February through book sales. So we're going to get, okay, book title, we put it there, okay, and then the total price. The total price, we put it there. Okay, we put it there. So now we can see, okay, these are our books. Okay, so say books. Okay, these are our books. Okay, these are our books. So these are the books that were sold in the month of February. So let me remove the filter there and include all the months. Okay, so these are the books that, this is the revenue. Okay, this is the revenue that was received in the month of January. Since that is money, let us put currency. Okay, so it is now clear there. Okay, so this is the revenue that was the total revenue that was received in the month of January and February. So for instance, if you are just interested to see, if you're just interested to see the revenue that was made, that was received in the month of January, so you can deactivate February there so that you remain with January. Okay, if you want February, you can just deactivate January and then include the February, just like that. So you can see that now this is the revenue that was generated specifically in the month of what? February. Okay, so that is how simple it is. Like I said, you make a pivot table depending on the information that you want that you want. Okay, so the first pivot table was this. Okay, this was this. Okay, showing the number of books that were sold per author. Okay, that were sold per author. Okay, now that were sold per author. Okay, now the last thing that I want to show you is how to create a pivot table. Okay, you can create a pivot table along with a pivot, I mean you can create a pivot chart along with a pivot table. Okay, so it is very important to have a chart because a chart is very easy to understand. Okay, so we have this data here that we want to show on the pivot chart. So be on the analyze tab, and then go to pivot chart. Okay, once you click there, then you have these options. So you have column chart, line chart, pie chart, bar chart, area chart, and so forth. Okay, so I want us to create a pivot, I mean a column chart. In one of my previous lessons, I did talk about how to create a chart. Okay, so you can watch that video just to update yourself on how to create a chart. Okay, and you can also learn how you can make your chart look much better. Okay, so let's create a chart here. So you select column chart, then you say okay. So this is the pivot chart. Okay, so we can hide this column, filled columns here. Okay, these filled buttons here, these filled buttons here, by saying you right click, then you say hide all filled buttons on the chart. So they are there. So this column chart here, it is actually showing this data here graphically. Okay, graphically. So we can name, we can give it a title by saying sales, okay, per author. Okay, sales per author. Okay, sales per author. So that is the title of our chart there. Okay, so this is how simple it is to create a pivot chart. Okay, so a pivot chart is a very good thing because it will help you to summarize data in a very effective way. Okay, in a very effective way. So like I said, you develop a pivot chart. Okay, you develop a pivot chart, I mean a pivot table, okay, based on the information that you need. And okay, and with the pivot tables, okay, you'll be dealing with different situations. Okay, so for you to be good in pivot tables, you just have to keep on practicing. Okay, the more you do them, the better you become. So just give yourself situations and try to do pivot tables, and then from there you just find yourself to be an expert, okay, in pivot tables. So please, that is how we can do pivot tables. Okay, so we are going to end here for today, and thank you so much for watching. And if you are watching my video for the first time, please do not forget to subscribe. Thank you so much, and we are going to meet next time where I'm going to be talking about how to create slicers. Okay, thank you so much. Bye.